Okay. This class that we've been having, the case for the Bible in the postmodern world, this is our last class of this series this Sunday. Next Sunday we'll have the brother from New Pathways, and the Sunday after that we'll be starting a class in the book of James in here. We've been talking about postmodernism as a worldview that is basically the worldview of the people in the United States and other places in the world, and how it's affecting Christianity and people's understanding of Christianity. It is affecting us in all kinds of ways, and I think it deserves a lot more conversation than what we've had in this class. But one of the things that happens is when people, whoever they are, whether they're our children or some people in some kind of a midlife crisis, or people that get hurt by the church in some way, or people that have a great deal of suffering that comes their way, and they begin to push away from the faith, there's lots of help for those people over the internet and in their chats and everything to help them push away from the faith. And many people are involved in this for whatever reasons. One of the things that we're hoping for this class is that we will realize that when people ask questions, they ought to be able to ask any question they want to ask. They ought to be able to talk about any doubts that they may have. And the church, we need to have some answers that are credible answers for them, things to make them think, because there's a lot of people that are giving them answers that are leading them away from the faith. So our attempt in this class has been to at least provide some perspective and some answers, some lines of research that might help people keep their faith. So last time and the time before, we were talking about the creation story, and we talked about the fact that the creation story is narrative, not poetry. And we talked about the fact that it has several things that are questioned. We were talking about, as we finished, how that the Bible teaches that things reproduce according to their kind. This is a repeated phrase in the creation story, and that kind begets kind. Felines beget felines, and canines beget canines, and bovines beget bovines, and equines beget equines, and on we go. Those is horses, equines, okay? And so all of those reproduce after their kind, and nature has continued that, and we don't see any example in nature today of species that are developing brand new species, okay? We talked about this idea of the chicken or the egg, which came first. And according to the Genesis account, it was the chicken, because God created things full grown. But even if you say, well, no, I don't think so, the egg, okay, well, where did the egg come from? I mean, where do eggs come from? Most eggs that I know of came out of a chicken. I don't know, but most eggs do. And so you're still in the same quandary. How did you get the egg? How did you get the chicken? They had to come from somewhere. The answer of the naturalistic evolutionist is that somehow it all developed over millions and millions of years, and some kind of a fowl developed and was mutated over millions and millions of years, and some bird began to produce a different species of bird or something. But we don't see that being replicated in the world today. The answer from their side would be, well, there's not enough time. If we could live millions and millions and millions of years, we might see it replicated. But see, it's a theory. You have to be clear that the whole naturalistic evolution thing is a theory. And it's a theory that's supported by certain assumptions. And those assumptions are not proven. One of the things that we're going to talk about here in just a moment is the supposed age of the earth, the age of living things. I was teaching Hebrews this week in the School of Preaching, and one of my students, they're having a test in Christian evidences, and he started saying, what can you explain to us about carbon-14 dating and so forth? Well, that's not my field, but they have a class in all these things. Radiocarbon dating or carbon dating, if you really look into this, is only good for thousands of years. You can talk about thousands of years, and they think it's fairly good. It only deals with living things, organic things, and it doesn't go back to, millions of years or even 100,000 years or whatever. It's only good for several thousand years. So what happens is when people are dating things, if they use radiocarbon dating and try to date things that are way, way older, they use that and they realize it's not that accurate, but then they start using, the age of rock strata and things like that. But then you get into all the theory of how do you date rock strata. Well, there's certain theories again that date rock strata, and those theories are based on a number of assumptions. One of the assumptions would be what we call uniformitarianism. Uniformitarianism is that processes that are happening today have always been happening at the same rate as they're happening today. So we've used this, I'm sure, many times, but let's say the Grand Canyon. How old is the Grand Canyon? Well, they take the rate of flow of the Colorado River and the rate of erosion, and they look at it and they say, well, it's eroding about this much a year, and then they extrapolate backwards and say it must be umpteen jillion years old. However, what if it wasn't running at the same rate always? What if there was some kind of a massive worldwide flood where huge quantities of water were rushing over the face of the earth in a volume and at a rate that hasn't been repeated, in many generations? Well, then what does that do to your extrapolation backward rate? Well, it changes it completely. And there's all kinds of other things that go into this. So what I'm trying to say is carbon-14 dating is married with rock strata theory, and they use this theory and that theory, and then with both of these theories, they try to come up with dates, but they're based on theories and they're based on assumptions. Okay, so if in fact, as Scripture says, things were created full grown, let's take trees. If trees, like the big oak trees in my backyard, if they were created full grown, well, what would you see if you cut one open? If it was full grown. If the man Adam was created full grown and you were to meet him and he looked like he was 30 years old, you would probably say, well, he's 30 years old, but he might have been born yesterday. You see what I'm saying? So it's all based on a series of assumptions. So what about the 6 days of creation? Should we take that literally? A lot of people say yes, a lot of people say no. It is true that the word yom, Y-O-M, in Hebrew, yod mem, yom, it means day, or in some cases it can mean a period of time. And there are cases in the Old Testament where day, in the day that God carried away Israel into Babylon, well, that was not one day, that was a period of time, see? So they make the point that a day can mean a longer period of time. And that's true. And nobody's going to disfellowship you if you believe that days represent longer periods of time. But consider this. Let's look at the language of the Old Testament for a minute. How many of you have been to the Creation Museum? Okay, a bunch of you have been up there. Ken Ham is a worker, and thank you, brother. You're a kind man. What happened to you? Did something happen to you? You got real kind. Okay, he's a kind man. All right, so Ken Ham from the Creation Museum was talking about this in a class. He's into the scientific stuff. Anyway, he's looked in the Hebrew text, and he's talked about the word yom, or day, outside of Genesis 1. Now, it's very interesting that this word occurs throughout the Hebrew Bible, but it's only in Genesis 1 that people seem to have an issue with this word. So outside of Genesis 1, he says, you have the word yom, or day. See, that word means day. You have the word yom plus a number, like it'll say the 8th day, or the 7th day, or 150 days, or something like that. So outside of Genesis 1, you'll find in the Hebrew Bible the word day with a number 410 times. And every single time of those 410 times, it refers to a 24-hour day. All right, outside of Genesis 1, you find in the Hebrew text the word yom, or day, with evening and morning 38 times. And every single one of those times, elsewhere besides Genesis 1, it refers to a 24-hour day. Outside of Genesis 1, you have the word yom, or day, with either evening or morning. Like it'll say the evening of the 20th day, or something like that. So if you have the word evening or the word morning and the word day, that occurs 56 times in the Hebrew Bible. And every single one of those times, it has reference to a 24-hour day. And then 52 times outside of Genesis 1 in the Hebrew Bible, you have the word yom and the word night, like on the 12th night or something like that. And so you have the word night with yom. And so every one of those times, it's a 24-hour day. So then he brings us back to Genesis 1 and says, okay, out of the entire Hebrew Bible, you have all these other occurrences that have either a number with it, or they have evening and morning with it, or they have either evening or morning with it, or they just have the word night along with the word day. And every one of those other occurrences refers to a 24-hour day. Now then we go back to the same author, Moses, the same, and we look in Genesis 1, and we're supposed to say, well, it doesn't really refer to a 24-hour day. You see the issue we're having here. All right, so let's look at the creation story. Let there be light. There was light, and God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and morning, and notice there was the first, that's a number, day. So we've got a number first. We've got day and night. We've got evening and morning. Well, okay, so let's go a little bit further. Genesis 1:14, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and days and years, or years. How many days in a year? And it was good. And so the evening and the morning, and there was the fourth, that's a number, isn't it? Day. Do you see what I'm saying or not? Okay. So just looking at the language, and my problem is language is where I live all the time. But just looking at the language and the usage of the language, it seems rather compelling when you look at the research as far as what the book intended. Now, you can still disagree. That's impossible. I don't believe that. I don't have to believe that, whatever. But it seems like the book intended for it to be understood as a 24-hour day. Now, this is very problematic to many people because they have a very difficult time reconciling that with evolutionary theory and genealogical theory. And if you're really working hard to, geological, not genealogical, if you're really trying hard to reconcile those theories with creation, you're going to have a stomachache for the rest of your life, because it's going to be difficult to do that, okay? But then you have to go back to your main assumptions. Do you believe in God? Do you believe that God is supernatural and all-powerful? Do you believe that little song that Jed sings with the people? Our God is so big, so strong. Andy can do it better. Would you do that for us right now? He says no. So strong and so mighty, there's nothing our God cannot do. Do you believe that? Well, if you do, then what's the big deal? You believe in the virgin birth? You believe in the resurrection of Christ? I mean, so if you believe in the Bible, you can't get around the idea of believing in the supernatural, and that's going to put you in tension with naturalistic theories that do not believe in the supernatural. It's just going to do that. All right, so I thought this was interesting. Now, if you or your loved